What's up, guys? I'm Phil Marks, and I watched Lanterns Episode 1. Let's get into it.
This ring, it's the greatest weapon in the universe.
So, admittedly, going into the show, I'm not the most die-hard Green Lantern fan. Now, I did grow up a fan of course, Jon Stewart and Justice League Unlimited. And I'm not the biggest hater on the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern movie either. It wasn't that great, but at the time, I was just happy to see superhero stuff getting made. That being said, Lanterns thus far is different than any other Green Lantern anything I have ever consumed. So the show starts out, and we're in like the 80s or something, and a young Jon Stewart is watching Hal Jordan on television, and Hal Jordan is already prolific as the Green Lantern, and he's explaining how he has no fear, and he lost a parent. You have no fear in life anymore once that happens as a child. Jon Stewart's dad comes home, and he's not supposed to be up watching TV, I assume, and this is where you kind of get the idea that there's no mother in the home, so already Jon Stewart has that in relation to Hal Jordan, and so Jon Stewart's dad takes him outside and shoots an apple off his head with a gun, and there's a bunch of bullet holes in the background of the shed, which indicates that this isn't the first time that Jon Stewart's dad has done this. So now we're in 2016, which is primarily the present time of the show, and Hal Jordan is training Jon Stewart how to be the next Green Lantern, and we get the scene that we all saw from the trailers where Hal Jordan jumps out of the car and Jon Stewart's forced to put the ring on, and Hal Jordan's in his Danny Glover I'm too old for this shit era. Jon Stewart is very stoic. The two kind of butt heads. They don't really consider each other friends, just co-workers, and I think the dynamic between the two are excellent. I think both of these guys are knocking it out of the park with their performances as Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart respectively. Now, one thing I didn't like, but it will obviously come into play as we move along in the series, is Hal Jordan, after he jumps out of the car, there's this hologram that pops up out of the ring as Jon Stewart is walking up the road. And this hologram, or this halogram, if you will, says, hey, I haven't been updated since 2006 or something like that, or I was updated 6 months ago, something along those lines. Like earlier this year I was updated, so he's kind of out of the loop on what's going on with Hal. And basically this hologram is like, you know, we all back up our memories onto these holograms, so that's going to come into play in a major way later in this season. But off rip, I was like, oh, okay, we're already doing this where we don't know who Hal is. A little bit of foreshadowing. So basically what happens is there's a mass shooting that goes down in a small town, and Jon Stewart and Hal Jordan head to the mass shooting to investigate, and Hal Jordan has a hunch that it's aliens that are involved in this thing, and it turns out he's right. Now at some point they go to a bar. This is after one of the alien perps are arrested, and in order to speak to him in the jail, Hal formulates a plan to get himself arrested by getting into a bar fight. And at this bar, we hear the story about how Hal was chosen by Abin Sur to wield the Green Lantern ring. Now, one thing I wish they had done was show little flashbacks. It didn't even have to be a whole flashback sequence, but even if they just showed like glimpses of what it was Hal Jordan was describing, I think it would have hit a little harder. But again, this is like a cop detective drama, I guess. And there's a lot of confusion online with Guy Gardner having a ring, and then Hal Jordan being a lantern, but then also training someone else to be a lantern, and a lot of people are like, there's supposed to be one lantern. And I read something interesting online, and someone wrote this: I don't know why everybody is just guessing when the truth is already out there. Here's the way it happened. The concept of an Earth backup was first introduced in Green Lantern Volume 2, number 59, in March 1968. In the issue, Hal Jordan asks his power ring what would have happened if Abin Sur had chosen someone else. The ring reveals that when Abin Sur crashed, Guy Gardner was equally worthy of the ring, but Hal was chosen simply because he was physically closer to the crash site. Recognizing that Earth and Sector 2814 needed a designated replacement ready to step in if Hal was incapacitated or off-world, the Guardians formally established Guy Gardner as Hal's primary backup. The standby protocol remained dormant until Guy was injured in Green Lantern 87, which happened in 1971-1972, forcing the Guardians to recruit Jon Stewart. And so they're sort of establishing in the DCU that that's how these rings and the Guardians view things and how this is going to work in this world, okay? So as I mentioned before, Jon Stewart and Hal Jordan helped a police lady arrest an alien that she isn't convinced is an alien, and so Hal's plan pays off. He gets in a bar fight, he gets thrown in jail. At some point, Jon Stewart meets some older, super mid lady that just isn't really believable. He'd go and smash like that in a parking lot, and I'm super sorry, lady, but I don't get it. I didn't really understand that. It's like they just needed Jon to smash someone who's connected to the wider story's wife for reasons, I guess. We'll get into more of that in a little bit. The next morning, Jon goes to get Hal out of jail, but of course the police lady's like, nope, I knew what his plan was. He wanted to talk to the alien. I threw him in the broom closet. So it's a small town. Of course, the next morning we go to Hal Jordan's hearing where the judge wants to make an example out of him, and this is where a random lawyer guy steps in, defends Hal, and gets him out on $200,000 bail out of nowhere, which is crazy. And obviously, you know, his eyebrows are raised, but at the same time, he doesn't want to get thrown back in the clink. And it turns out that this lawyer is Police Chief Lady's husband. And as we'll come to find out, the mid-old lady in the bar, the police chief, the lawyer, they're all connected. This small town is all interwoven in some weird way. So the money is actually coming from the lawyer's father, which is the police chief's father-in-law, and this gentleman's name is Mr. Macon. And the Macon family, to my knowledge, has no existence in Green Lantern comic book lore or anything like that. And it should be noted that Hal kinda seemingly has a crush on the police chief, and she warns him that, you know, Macon isn't somebody you want to be indebted to. It's revealed that the reason Macon bailed Hal Jordan out isn't because he's a fan or anything like that. It's because he's fully aware of the alien problem. And he's all like, well, we need to take out these fucking aliens, I'll tell you what. And it turns out Macon also seemingly knows that Jon Stewart banged his wife. That's right, the mid-old lady from the bar is actually Macon's wife, which is Billy Macon, the lawyer's mom, and also Police Chief Macon's mother-in-law. At least that's my understanding of things. Now, I've also seen backlash online about Jon Stewart being a vegan in the show, and they're like, oh, they're pussifying the character and all of these things. Now, if being a vegan ends up making him a pussy later in the show somehow, then I understand. And it is weird being a Green Lantern and all he eats are greens. Just an unfunny observation. But I don't think it's that big of a deal. I don't know if he canonically in the comic books was a vegan or at any point turned into a vegan, but relax, guys, it's a TV show. So Mr. Macon talks to his daughter. He convinces her to allow Hal Jordan to interrogate the alien, which she still isn't convinced that it is an alien, although it's likely cognitive dissonance. She just doesn't want to accept what she knows is reality and bring more trouble to her small town. And it should be noted that the Macon's property is just layered with armed guards. You've heard of sweating bullets? Well, these boys piss and shit lead, okay, fellas? So Hal goes to the police station and interrogates the alien, and this is where he reveals one of his tactics is like, okay, aliens know about general stuff, like they can describe to you what happens in a football game, and they can retain little factoids like, oh, this is who won the Super Bowl this year. But when it comes to like, yo, what school did Harry Potter go to? You know, oh, you heard that album? Yeah, you know the song Love Hurts or whatever, and they might not know things like that, and they just have very generic takes on things. And these aliens, again, they're shapeshifters. They look like humans, so it's not like on the surface it looks like an alien. We don't know what they look like. But basically, Hal makes this alien confess that he is an alien, and he lets Hal know, look, I'm here for vengeance. That's why I'm here. And so the alien also reveals that he's got like a bomb somewhere implanted in him. He says, look, Hal, like, you don't know how big this explosion could be. It could wipe out the whole town. You didn't charge up your ring in the last 48 hours, did you, bud? Because you're running out of powers. And again, a nice little plot point there to let us know, like, okay, you also got to charge these rings up. It's just not infinite constructs that you can create. And by the way, the visuals of the constructs, the visuals of Hal Jordan flying off in the air and stuff, it all looks awesome to me. I like the way the constructs are seemingly built up of this like green green material that sort of like comes out of the air. It looks really cool. It was cool in Superman. You know, in this episode, we don't see many constructs other than I think like a bottle opener. Hal at one point turns it into a $5 bill and then inserts it into a jukebox. But in this instance, the alien's like, hey, I'm gonna blow shit up. And so he goes to explode himself, and Hal's able to create a bubble and cover the blast, although in the moment it's hard to tell whether or not Hal died or whether or not it killed any people or whether or not it wiped out a city block in the first moment. And then you realize, okay, it just exploded this room essentially and Hal was able to cover it up. But is he okay? John and Cop Lady look into the interrogation room and it turns out Hal is okay. He survived the blast for now. The entire town sees that there's an explosion. Everybody's kind of freaking out. And that's when we jump ahead to the year 2026, which is present time. In the real world, it's safe to assume Hal's been the Green Lantern for what, 30 or 40 years throughout the timeline we're seeing? It's winter time. John Stewart has a goatee and he drives back to this small town and he meets up with the old police chief, Lady Macon. They head out to the football field where the original mass shooting took place, and so you have somewhat of a realization, oh, there's going to be a tragedy that took place here. And out sitting on the bleachers where John Stewart and Hal were sitting together while investigating the original mass shooting, Hal Jordan's sitting there frozen and there's a bullet hole in his head. Spoilers? Did I say spoilers? So Hal Jordan is effectively dead from what we can tell. However, the episode ends, but not before John Stewart wipes Hal Jordan's hand to reveal that he's not wearing his ring. So this could indicate many things. It could mean Guy Gardner's the new Lantern and John Stewart never became the Lantern and he's the reserve backup Lantern for Hal and Guy, depending, like we read earlier, kind of what happened in the comics. It could mean that that's a hologram of Hal. It could be a shape-shifting alien version of Hal Jordan for all we know. However, James Gunn had tweeted out previously, if you die in the DCU, you're dead, but we don't know for sure that that was Hal dying. And so the ending gives you a brilliant moment of, oh shit, did Hal die from the explosion? He might be dead. No, they killed him off. And then just like, oh, such relief. He's not dead. And then you jump 10 years into the future and then it turns out he's dead and you're just like heartbroken again. And again, there's a lot of backlash online with people saying things like, oh, you're just destroying Hal Jordan. I mean, Hal Jordan's died in the comics and we don't even know that he's dead right now. It could just simply be that he made one of the alien shapeshifters turn into him, or he used the hologram to trick a shapeshifter into whatever, okay? We don't know what happened, but so many people are already melting down and writing this show off. Now let's talk about the show itself, the quality of the show. All of the acting's on point. All of the superhero-y visual effects that you want to see. Now there's not a lot of it. It's more like a cop drama show, which we all sort of anticipated. You know, some people say it should be Lethal Weapon in space, and I'm not opposed to that either, but this is what we got. And it's not slop by any means. The acting's tremendous. The casting is really good. The music, the cinematography, the story they're telling has me hooked. Like, I really want to know what's going on with the aliens in this weird town. As a matter of fact, if this wasn't even a Lantern show and it was just a show about like men in black or aliens in a small town, I would be invested, okay? The story's there, the characters are there, the acting is fantastic from both Aaron Pierre and Kyle Chandler, respectively. And I don't want my reviews for each episode of this show to turn into me breaking down scene by scene, beat by beat, every little detail that happens, but these details are important to set up what to expect moving forward in the series. And all I can say is I'm hooked. Now, if you're a die-hard Green Lantern fan, maybe this isn't for you. Maybe this isn't exactly your cup of tea or what you expected from the show. Like I said at the beginning of this, I have never been the biggest like Green Lantern comic book reader. To me, he was always sort of just a background player. And also the fact is he was one of, or they are one of many other Green Lanterns. Now, I like superhero movies that are nitty and gritty, just like anybody else. My favorite Batman films and my favorite superhero movies, bar none, are the Dark Knight trilogy, which gives you a very realistic look at Batman if he existed in a real world. At the same time, I love Superman 2025, and I love the over-the-top cartoony Spider-Man Brand New Day. I love things that are comic book accurate as they can be. Again, we can't ever be one-to-one with the comic books. This is taking characters and making a live-action version of them. Again, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man isn't comic book accurate one-to-one. Those are some of the greatest movies ever made. You look at the X-Men and even them making fun of the yellow spandex, and now people want yellow spandex, but in reality, Hugh Jackman being 6'4" and Wolverine being 4'6", that's an over-exaggeration, but in the comic books, the contrast there, if we were to play comic book snob about it, it's not one-to-one there either, but it worked and it got over and people enjoy these movies, and now there's a million spin-offs and they're included in the Avengers films and all of this stuff. So me personally, I'm willing to accept the fact that the DCU isn't going very origin story heavy. In Supergirl, which I wasn't the biggest fan of that movie, I gotta be honest. I thought it actually sucked pretty badly, not going to lie. But we get more of an origin story, or a backstory if you will, through flashbacks for like 2 minutes of the flick. In Superman, there's no real origin story. We simply get, hey, Superman's been here for 3 years. Creature Commandos, they're already more or less established, same with Peacemaker. And in this version of Green Lanterns, Hal Jordan's already been the Green Lantern for, like I said, 3 or 4 decades or something like that. So I'm okay with the story picking up where he's passing it along to John Stewart, who is also an incredibly popular character in his own right. Like I said, I grew up watching Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, so John Stewart is my Green Lantern. Hal Jordan's the old man Green Lantern. There's a lot of speculation whether or not Sinestro or the Manhunters will be a part of this show. I'm not sure what's confirmed and what isn't, but I'm locked in. I'm ready for more lanterns. Again, this story isn't about the Green Lantern. It is about lanterns. It is about the Green Lanterns. And those were the best Looney Tunes episodes when Daffy Duck crossed over with the lanterns. You know what I'm saying? And when you think about it, even Ryan Reynolds' Green Lantern was about the fact that there is more than one lantern. So if you just wanted to see Hal Jordan be the Green Lantern and see his origin story and all of these things, all I can say is that already exists in other forms and other mediums that you can go and watch. But for now, in this universe, with this story they're telling, I'm locked in. Now, Supergirl was a bit of a step backwards for the DCU. I'm not even gonna lie. And I was a little nervous going into Lanterns because this is the first television show that James Gunn didn't touch. Some people like Gunn, some people don't. Well, Supergirl was the first movie that he didn't really touch. Apparently he was trying to edit and save it last minute. And whether that's the case or not, who knows, but that movie wasn't so good. I was worried this show would suffer the same fate that I was getting hype over the trailers just to be let down watching the show itself. But not only do I think the show knocked it out of the park, I think it exceeded what my initial expectations were.
Did you just use that ring to counterfeit money? No.
First episode, I give a solid 8 out of 10, maybe a 7 out of 10. Let me know what you thought about Lanterns episode 1 in the comments down below. And if you don't mind liking, subscribing, hyping the video, and hitting that bell so you don't miss any Lanterns reviews, I've been Phil Marks, and until next time, in brightest day and blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight.